Welcome, you 8,162 subscribers, first-time viewers, and LinkedIn watchers to a little bit delayed episode of Build Better Clients with myself, Simon Linstead, and Mike Pedrick here today. Firstly, apologies for the delay in starting. I'm having terrible internet issues. Need to have a chat with Elon Musk about my Starlink connection. And I've had to drive down the road to a friend of mine's to use his spare room for this stream today. So a little bit of a different backdrop. Hopefully the content's still going to be as good as always. And I'm super excited to be chatting with Mike Pedrick today. We chatted for the first time a few weeks back. I'm not going to spoil too much the topic of the chat today, but make sure you get those questions ready. And if the intro video is uploaded for Mike, I'm going to play that now and bring him straight on. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm sorry it's taken like 4 days, and nearly didn't happen again, Mike. So apologies for that.
No worries at all. No worries at all.
I see we've got some fans in the house of you. I see we've got Maria and Carlos in the chat. We've also got, by the looks of it, around about 27 people in total in the chat. So thanks to everyone for tuning in today. We're going to be running for around about 30 minutes. And we want to make this as engaging as possible. So make sure that you ask any questions that you might have throughout. But I'm going to start off by just asking you, Mike, to give our audience a little bit of background about yourself and what you do now.
Sure. So background on myself, I am a consultant providing advisory services to organizations, most of which are in the small and medium-sized business space. I've been a consultant in one fashion or another since 2005, a little over 20 years in the IT and information security space in general. And one of the things that I've noticed that has sort of formulated the perspectives and the way in which I interact with clients is this notion that service providers, consultants, folks like me, and organizations that have folks like me, I feel like we could be doing a little bit better with our clients from the perspective of, we want clients to be better. We want them to interact with us more. We want them to consume more of our services. And in a lot of cases, I've seen folks sort of lament why clients aren't better. Why don't clients have this in their program or that in their program? Or why don't they understand certain concepts? And my question to service providers has always been, if you want a better client, why don't you build a better client? And so for most of this year, I've been posting on LinkedIn little snippets, thoughts, musings, etc., under the hashtag build a better client. And it's intended to be for a wake up call to some extent for service providers, but also from the perspective of clients, right? You could also, as a client, pick up the phone, call your service provider. I don't care if they're a security services or just a managed services provider, and say, listen, it's time to have a talk. Let's chat about these things and make sure that we level set in terms of expectations. What's in my agreement? What's not in my agreement, et cetera. How can we do this relationship better?
I love that, and I want to dig in. I want to dig into how you're doing that a little bit more in a moment, but this might be relevant. I've been very fortunate the last couple of weeks to meet with some very high level CEOs of some very, very large businesses um, here in the UK. And after speaking with them, one of whom has just recently replaced their CISO after a breach. I'm not going to mention who the company is, but they've been through quite a turbulent period of time. And a common vein of thought from two of the leaders that I spoke to, as in business leaders, not security leaders, was that they know that they need to take a more strategic and consultative approach to their security operations. But it doesn't seem, they feel, this is their comment, not mine, they feel that the industry hasn't caught up to that yet. And it's still very vendor focused on tooling. And it's as though they're waiting for us to catch them up. Mike, I don't know if you've experienced that at all.
I absolutely have, and I want to be judicious about how I say this. The vendor relationship with industry in general sort of pays the way for the rest of us, right? They pick up the check so that we can do what we do, what other organizations can do what they do, et cetera. So I think there's always going to be some level of that expectation that tools need to be sold, products need to be sold, et cetera, right? Nothing is going to happen in a vacuum. Nothing's going to happen for free. But I do wholeheartedly, now that I've said that, I've done service to that. I want to also say that I agree that there is just too much pressure, I think, on, what tool set are we going to use? In broad terms, if you need a new roof on your home, you don't hire the hammer. You hire the individual who knows how to use it well,
So
right?
true. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's again, necessary evil, necessary part of our world. But I genuinely do think there needs to be more people who understand the tools, how to use the tools effectively, and not be afraid of telling a client or a business, et cetera, when a tool isn't necessary. If it can be resolved with a low tech solution or a process, or gosh, just changing what's already there from a
Yeah.
process perspective, you're going to make a whole lot more friends that way.
100%. And I think, I mean, the trends show, and I've used this saying several times on this live stream, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And if you look at the spend on cybersecurity tooling, or the spend on cybersecurity in general, and then you look at the breach comparison the last few years, it doesn't seem that what we're doing at the moment is working particularly well, does it?
It doesn't. Although I also want to put out there that we have a tendency to look at those trends as though, the implication is that there's some utopian destination where we're all secured and these are never going to be problems again.
Yeah.
But humanity on the whole has a lot of the same problems we've always had for, millennia. And that it just is what it is. It's how it's going to be.
Yeah. Basically, we are all insane, right? I think.
Sure. Well, yeah. Like, hey, we're all a little
Woo!
bit insane, right? Like that's just to be expected. So yeah, 100%. But
I think what I'd like to dig into is I know you've run a series on this, on how to build a better client. For me, not in this industry, but in financial services, there's two things I think that stand out. One is using these more than
Mhm.
this, and actually listening to what their challenges are. Maybe not security challenges, but challenges in general for the business. And secondly, adding value and contacting them even when you're not going to sell them something or provide them a service, and keeping them updated. That's as far as my input in this conversation is going to go. So I'm hoping you're going to put some meat around the bones there.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things to unpack from what you just said, and they're both super relevant, right? So the first thing is that Absolutely, positively. Put this in a list of cardinal rules. If the only time you communicate with your clients is when you send them the invoice, you can count on there not being a whole lot more invoices. Don't do that. That's the wrong approach. It's not the way to make lasting relationships with a client. So yeah, reach out. Hey, how are you doing? How are things going? What can we help with? What are your big, hairy, audacious goals for the next 5 quarters? How can we help? And I want to double click on that real quick. I had a dialogue with a group of CISOs and leaders here in my area, and a couple of them sort of were taken aback by that statement when I said, "I want to know about your business. I want to understand what's important to your organization, what's important to your business, what are your goals, etc." And they were, again, they were taken aback by this, and they said, "No, no, no. This wants to be a transactional relationship. We hire you to do a thing." Now, I understand. I agree. And in order for me to do that thing effectively,
Yeah,
I have to know more about the business, right? That's just a part of the conversation. And I would absolutely advocate for being, measured in what is shared with consultants and shared with external vendors. I'd be remiss as a consultant in information security if I didn't advocate
of
for
course.
that. But like it can't all be a closed book. If I don't know, even if you take it down to tactical or operational concerns, right? If you are a SOC and you see an event occur in the logs on the dashboard, you see something happen, right? An event is neither good nor bad absent additional context. But sometimes that context is just we have somebody signing in outside of business hours. Well, all right. Well,
Yeah,
is it an accounting employee and it's end of month processes and they're just trying to get caught up? Or is this indicative of a larger scale attack? I need that context. I need that business level experience to do that. And again, that's purely operational. We're
yeah.
not even talking about strategy yet. That's a larger conversation. So yeah, engaging with the client, understanding what their needs are, listening, and understanding that no two clients are going to have the same priorities, the same problems, the same concerns, and treating each one individually, not trying to paint them all with the same brush.
100%. And just to take a step back before that part of the process, how
Mhm.
can we find better clients? Can I ask that question? So one of the biggest
Please.
challenge, yeah, one of the biggest challenges it seems, whether it's vendors or consultancies alike, is finding the right clients to work with who value what it is you do, rather than and these are perhaps not the good clients, which are the ones who just want you in to tick a box and then ship
Mhm.
you off afterwards. How important is that, and how do you go about building new client relationships?
So, or answering in reverse order, establishing new client relationships is always a matter of it's not dissimilar to dating or making friends as an adult, right? You strike up a conversation, it works or it doesn't. You find common ground, and you grow that relationship from there. And but in terms of keeping clients, I've interfaced with organizations in the past that have always used a target revenue number. If we can't get this much revenue out of this client, or here's the threshold below this number, whether it's MRR or ARR, we're not going to keep this client on the books. And again, that's a matter of prudence. That's a matter of necessity from a business
Of
perspective.
course.
But my struggle with this is always that I've had it happen over the years where even a small client, two people operating in a one room, over somebody's garage, office, right? And they're just starting out, they're fledgling, their billing is maybe $400 a year, a month rather, at best. But they are a gateway to much larger organizations,
Yeah.
or even if they're not a direct gateway to larger organizations, having them be happy with you, having them feel like they are your only client in every interaction you have with them, causes them to tell other organizations who tell other organizations who tell
100%.
other organizations, right? And so I know I'm not making any friends in larger orgs when I say this, but that floor, that MRR or ARR floor, you got to break that sometimes. You got to do some of the smaller orgs.
And you've got to look for potential as well, right? Because those smaller orgs today could be the big orgs of the future. And again,
Right.
this is everything you've said resonates in that it's about building relationships with people. And you should always, as much as you can, be open, I think, from personal experience, to helping as many people as you can, as long as you're still in a
Right.
position where you can, survive and earn money. But
Absolutely.
whether you want it to or not, that comes back, and it might not
Mhm.
come back next month, but it will definitely come back.
Well, and you never know too, again, that 2 to 5 person organization in the the super small business space, maybe they get bought up by a larger company, right? Maybe
Yeah,
that 2-person firm becomes a 10-person firm, that 10-person firm gets bought up by a 5,000-person firm, and now you burned that bridge previously, right?
yeah,
So you never know. And I'll also say here too that the whole reason I got into information security and largely consulting in general is that the small and medium sized business space is grotesquely underserved.
very
These
much so.
organizations are huge targets. And when they reach out for help, again, the bigger orgs just say, nah, I can't work with you. There's not enough there for me, right? I can't make money
Yeah.
off of you. Come on.
I agree, but let's be honest, the big vendors and the big consultancies, that they haven't structured their businesses to deal with smaller companies. It's as simple as
True.
that. So they've priced themselves out of the market. And for me, I think the SMB sector and the micro sector are going to be the biggest growth areas over the next 2 to 3 years. And I completely agree. It's very, very underserved um, in the industry. But I think there's a lot of forward-thinking people who are realizing that. And with automation, with AI, I'd like to think that it could become more affordable to smaller
Mhm.
businesses as well. Can we touch on that for a moment? Do you see
Sure.
how do you see the SMB sector being served? If the big companies can't afford to do it, how can we make that a viable business alternative effectively?
I think the key, and I'm biased. I wear my biases on my sleeve as an educator as well as a consultant. I think that's the key, right?
Yeah,
A lot of these small and medium sized business based organizations, they've spent the last however many years building their business and doing the things that they know to do, right? I think a little education goes a long way. I'm not trying to make the CEO of an organization that builds widgets an expert in information security. That's not my goal here. But I want to give them just enough ammunition so that they can see a vendor walking in the door and understand the difference, as we talked about previously, about somebody who is trying to sell an 8-figure tool deployment to somebody who can't afford it and couldn't get the use out of it anyway, against somebody who's coming in and saying, here's what you need to do in unambiguous terms. Here are the top 5 priorities for protecting your information, keeping things running. Let's have a conversation about resiliency, because we know that you can't weather you know dramatic storms at your scope and scale. And so, again, a little bit of education goes a really long way. And I think that it's incumbent on us as professionals not to try to play what we know close to the vest, and to
yeah,
just share that information, give that information out. Nobody benefits more than the entire industry when we
everyone.
spread that gospel. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly.
everyone. And I think there's a lot of commonalities between this industry and financial services. I worked in the investment side of it, and
Mhm.
people who are very knowledgeable on different types of investments and derivatives and trading styles, they like to overcomplicate the discussions to the clients, I think, as well. And
Yes.
I think we like to extol how much we know sometimes as individuals, when it would be much better if we could share that. I've seen that we've got some questions in. My camera's up here, my screen's down here. So excuse
Sure.
me while I just shimmy you to the top of the screen so that I don't cut you in half. And I'm going to bring up Prashant's one first. Here we go. Prashant has asked, are the days of buying lists from the black market a done and dusted thing? And when will suppliers or suppliers slash resellers start to properly qualify leads before making contact with prospective clients? Good question.
Boy, that is a super good question.
Yeah.
Top of the list, no, I don't think it's done at all. And in fact, I think it's being done at least as often as it ever has been in the past.
Yeah.
I think if there's any strategy for ending that practice, and trust me when I say I emphatically want that practice ended, is privacy legislation. I think
Yeah.
as soon as there are more strict controls around what information can be shared and between what groups or entities, it will become the effort. against the gain will be too high, right? It's going to be
Yeah.
too arduous, too painful to buy lists of contact information. For example, if I have to reach out to each contact and get their informed consent, like I'm not going through that process. Forget about it. I will
No.
find another mechanism, or I'll just skirt the law, which hopefully consequences would dictate that's not the right idea.
100%. And I think Prashant's followed it on actually with another question. Let me bring that one up because it's also very relevant. Should solutions providers be product neutral, or will high commission based sales generation the only way forward? Another good question. Again, it's for me, if I can jump in quickly from a
Mhm.
non-industry point of view, I think the industry's got a lot of maturing to do in that respect, Prashant, and the fact that everything's very vendor-led at the moment, I see that changing to a more Mike Pedrick consultative strategic approach based on all the conversations I've had the last couple of years. And I think the solutions providers need to become to the point where they are independent, or maybe whole of market might be a better term, so that they can then work with their client to provide them with the best service rather than whatever tool they've got in their bag. But I'll let Mike
Mhm.
answer it from an experience perspective.
No, I don't know that I could say it any better than that. I do think that solutions providers, service providers should be vendor agnostic, perhaps vendor preferential. But if
Yes.
I go to an organization and I say, you need XYZ for your program, I've recognized this gap. You don't have good, you don't have a good endpoint security solution. My goal for the next thing I say should not be, oh, and by the way, we're partnered with
Yeah,
insert
100%.
mega corporation here. It should be, here are three options. In
Yeah.
fairness, we are partnered with this option, but these other two have good benefits as well. Anything less than that, I think, just anything less than that, I think, goes directly to a lack of credibility on the part of
Agreed.
that individual.
I completely agree. And I think, again, from speaking to business leadership rather than security leadership, that's what they want as well. They see it in every other industry. They see it with all different people they deal with in other industries, that's the
Mhm.
process that they use. And I think as an industry we need to mature a little bit more. I think it will naturally go to that. And I suppose that brings up the topic of consolidation as well. What have we got? Over
Mhm.
4,000 vendors in the market at the moment. Could I argue that there's lots of them doing something very similar but with a special twist on it? Do you see that changing in the next few years, or will consolidation be at the detriment to innovation?
So I think the problem I'm seeing, there's two ways that I look at that. The first is that we have problems with hiring. We have problems with complexity in getting, good talent into the right organizations. And one of the byproducts of that, or results of that challenge, is that a lot of people are going out on their own or deciding to start new businesses themselves. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's actually fantastic. I strongly support that. But what it's going to lead to is an organic, growth of options that are out there. And some are going to be more mature than others, more
Yeah.
well baked than others. But I also have a tendency to think, and I think that we're seeing it unfold with some major vendors like, VMware right now, where the consolidation process can go wrong, can go sideways in a very big hurry, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily like the idea of there being 4,000 individual choices in this particular space, especially when so many are nearly identical. You can't even, Coke versus Pepsi versus RC Cola. You
Yeah.
can't even make that level of differentiation between a lot of the products that are out there.
No, agreed.
But again, consolidation I think has its own risks, and we have to be pretty careful about that as well.
But very much so. I suppose what it would offer is the ability for more vendors to use the terminology single pane of glass, which I'm sure
Oh
they'd
my
be pleased
goodness,
with.
yes, yes.
Let's not even
That
get
is an
started.
undead phrase, isn't it?
Let's not get started on that one. Oh, I just noticed that InfoSec Pat is in the audience. Good to see you, Pat. We need to catch up soon. I hope it's sunny in Florida and not as cold as it is here. Next question is from our friend Carlos Guerrero. Good to see you, my friend. And he said, Mike, have you ever fired a client? I thought he said, if so, who? But you haven't been that brave. If so, for what reason?
Candidly, yes. I've refused to continue operating with specific clients. One case that stands out was actually years ago. Um, we had an individual who was responsible for managing the team's calendars. We like to affectionately called it, she was a Tetris master with our calendars. And so, it was a tremendous service that she was providing to the team. No hint of a lie there. But also, she found herself, by way of that scheduling process, she found herself uh, in contact with several clients. Okay, so she reached out to a client and said, hey, Mike is not available in this window. Can we shift this to another window, et cetera? Very innocent sort of process. We have to do it all the time, especially when our attention is so divided amongst so many organizations. Well, anyway, the client was exceedingly rude to this individual, like just unnecessarily so, like scarily so. Um, call the authorities sort of rude to
Oh,
her.
wow.
And so the next time I talked to the client, I said, listen, I don't think we're going to continue working together, because this is not the way this individual should be treated. I'm not going to be a party to that. So sorry. And so that's not a very auspicious way to fire a client. That's not oh, they didn't pay their bills, or they didn't, whatever. But I very strongly believe that if I'm steadfastly committed to being respectful and, judicious with how I interact with my clients, I expect the same from them. It's just, it's good business sense.
It is. And I think, I don't know whether to tell this story or not because it's a little bit fresh still. I will actually, and just hope they're not watching. I won't mention the name, but I think it's important to work with clients who align with your own values and not to sell out as well,
Mhm.
especially if you're independent and you work for yourself. We had 3 sponsored events last week at Black Hat. We had Bug Crowd for a round table, fine dining, which was amazing. And we had a community event that was kindly sponsored by Anecdotes compliance company. And we had another leadership dinner on Thursday with another vendor, neither of those that I've just mentioned. And we kind of made it clear at the start of the relationship, the ethos of our events, the community driven aspect of it, the fact that there was no sales pitches. And
Mhm.
I agreed to this event a little bit hesitantly, because we only had 2 or 3 weeks to fill it. It was
Yeah.
quite short notice. But after 5 days of starting to fill the event and having conversations, it was clear that this vendor didn't align with any of the values we had on our events. So we actually sacked the vendor as a client, in the process of refunding them their deposit. And we hosted the event ourselves and paid for it, because I think if you've got values that you hold close to you, no
Mhm.
matter how much you need the money, you can't sell out to that. And you've got to, back to that better clients thing, you want to be working with people who you want to work with, don't you? And who you're going to be able
Absolutely.
to give value to, and hopefully receive some value back. Maria, nice to see you. Mad Dog, Prashant, would you hug or fire Simon if he was one of your clients? You're such an ass, Prashant. The last guy I had on was a CISO here in the UK who'd spent 30 years in law enforcement. And Prashant's question to him was, if you met Simon in the street, would you hug him or arrest him? Which I think is worse. But he said he'd arrest me first and then hug me, which I thought was quite kind.
I think it might be a violation of ethics, but like, I mean, I'm not in law enforcement, so maybe they're doing things differently now than I think they do.
Maybe, yeah. Maria's question. Great to see you, Maria. We really must catch up soon. Mike, what do you do when a client refuses to take your recommendations? Good question.
This is also a really good question. So I have to counsel my students, the people that have reported to me over the years. A big part of what we do is tremendously stressful. And realistically speaking, whether you're talking to a client, you're a consultant, you're talking to a client, or you're a CISO and you're interfacing with the business, one of two things is true. If you lay out the risks and you lay out what's going on and you explain it in clear terms that everybody in the room understands, you've done your job. If they take those recommendations, if they move forward with those recommendations, fantastic. But if they don't, you should still rest easy. You did your job. You
Yep.
laid out what was at stake. And the worst case scenario is that you made a weak argument. You didn't make an argument at all. You didn't come forward with your best effort from the standpoint of laying out that risk. But again, it's their choice to make. And so I early in my career, I thought, well, I need a second chance. I need to go back and, just browbeat them into, taking my recommendations. But I don't agree. I don't agree anymore. I'm gonna open up with, here's what I think is at stake. Here are all the risks. If I'm comfortable coming out of that conversation that they understood what I said the way that I said it, case closed.
Yeah,
That's,
and
that's the end of that.
it's to you to inform and educate. It's for them, if they can't see the wood for the trees, as some people clearly can't. It doesn't matter how you put it to them or how well you present it. I think it's just not going to happen, is it? Who's this? Brian. Brian, hi. Hopefully this was an awesome live. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it has been good, and we're sort of approaching the end because we said 30 minutes today. So I want to finish off with your top tip. Well, actually, no. Let me ask you this first. So explain to me what your perfect client looks like. And I don't mean from a fiscal point of view, but from a relationship point of view.
My favorite clients are the ones that understand almost telepathically, right? If they come to me and say, tell me about log4j. What is log4j? Should I care? Right? Those clients that initiate a conversation that leads to, let's talk it through. Let's understand what it is, what the threat is, what the vulnerability is, what is the risk to your organization in no uncertain terms. And they walk away with knowledge that they didn't have previously. And I walk away feeling like I provided that client a service that was not, I installed a thing or I updated a thing or whatever the case may be. And even though that's actually the antithesis of a lucrative transaction with the client. But my experience over the years has been those moments, those tiny little minutes lead into years with that particular client.
100%. And I think it speaks volumes of the caliber of consultant you are, the fact that you gave that question as well. It wasn't a trick question, but that was so the right answer, Mike, wasn't it?
I thank you.
Last question then. If you could give your top tip to people who are looking to build their better client, what would it be?
Oh man, I'm going to steal from you at the start. Listen to the client, ask questions. If don't make any assumptions about what they need. One of my favorite examples is if you're a service provider, like you do all things IT. If there's electricity running through it, you take care of it for your client. The time to find out what their data retention requirements is not when they come to you asking for something to be recovered that's outside the window of what you've been backing up.
Yeah.
That's not the time to find that out. That's how, terms end very quickly. The time to find out is right up front to say, hey, what do you need? Yeah. And bonus points here, right? If they're paying for X amount of storage, but their retention requirements dictate Y, tell them what it costs. I almost guarantee they'll pay it.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been super interesting and insightful. And I hope that I can get you back on in the new year when I've got a stable internet connection and a real studio behind me. Not that there's anything wrong with my friend's spare room. Just quickly before we go, I'm in Texas, in Austin. First event for 2024, January the 25th, I think it is, Austin, Texas, hosting an event with Connect.io. Got a couple of other sponsors coming on board for that. But we do have 24 events planned for 2024, in-person events around the UK and US. So if anyone's interested in finding out more about either sponsoring those or attending those, drop me a message on LinkedIn, reach out to me through the community, or again, here on YouTube. But Mike, everyone who's been watching, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share. And for those in the audience, thanks for taking the time to ask questions and listen. And if I don't see you all before, I'm back tomorrow, I think 1 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, 6 p.m. GMT, for a follow-on with Steve Hindle and Paul Dunlop talking about the recent SEC ruling against SolarWinds and their CISO. So just opening up that can of worms just before Christmas. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers, man. Bye.